Hi everyone, welcome to Carpe Diem Sailing. My name's Marco, I'm a Sail Canada cruising instructor, and in today's video I'll be showing you an easy way to apply the rules of the road while you're out enjoying a day on the water. Welcome to episode 19, Collision Regulations, Basic. For helpful show notes and checklists, please visit www.carpediemsailing.com/shownotes. And now, let's get started. The Collision Regulations, or Colregs as they're commonly known, are a set of international rules for preventing collisions at sea. They have been ratified by most of the world's maritime nations. Written in legalese, they can be quite difficult to interpret, and many of the rules do not typically apply to recreational boaters. Over the years of teaching the Colregs, I have developed a method, somewhat like an algorithm, to help simplify and interpret the rules as they apply to recreational boaters. One thing to keep in mind is that the rules all have exceptions. The only hard and fast rule is to avoid a collision if able to do so, regardless of who is privileged or burdened. I will break it down step by step as the video progresses, but first, let's get to some definitions. A power-driven vessel is any vessel using machinery to propel itself. This includes sailboats, whether they have sails up or not. It does not apply, however, to a sailboat under sail using its engine to charge batteries. All too often, I hear the term right-of-way. There is no such thing in the Colregs. Ultimately, it is every mariner's responsibility to avoid a collision. The correct term is stand-on, which means that the privileged vessel must maintain course and speed, acting predictably, but ready to avoid a collision if the other vessel, the burdened vessel, does not give way, which means to keep clear. This one's a bit tricky. The windward side of a sailboat determines its tack. By Colreg's definition, the windward side of a sailing vessel is the side opposite to that on which the mainsail is carried. How's that for some legalese? Technically, it has nothing to do with the wind. The reason for this is that when a sailboat is running, the wind is on the stern. So as we see here, on a run, a sailboat can be on starboard or port tack. More on tacks and how they apply to the Colregs in a minute. For now, let's get back to my algorithm. The first rule that you need to know is Rule 5, which states that you must maintain a lookout by sight and hearing at all times. While maintaining a lookout, you notice another vessel approaching. The next rule you need to know is Rule 7, determining whether a risk of collision exists. The rule states that a risk shall be deemed to exist if the compass bearing of an approaching vessel does not appreciably change. In other words, if the relative angle between two vessels approaching each other does not change, a risk of collision exists. On the other hand, if the angle does change, there is no risk of collision. An easy way to determine this is to line up a part on your boat, a stanchion for example, with the approaching vessel. If the approaching vessel remains lined up with the stanchion, a risk of collision exists. If no risk of collision exists, you simply carry on and return to maintaining a lookout. If a risk of collision does exist, and you're under sail while the approaching vessel is power-driven, Rule 18, Responsibilities Between Vessels, states that sail stands on over power. The give-way vessel, in this case the powerboat, endeavors to keep clear, ideally by going astern of the stand-on vessel, and does so early and with enough of an alteration in course to be apparent to the other vessel. There is one notable exception to this. Rule 13 applies to all vessels overtaking and being overtaken. The vessel being overtaken stands on. This includes a power-driven vessel being overtaken by a vessel under sail. If a vessel under sail overtakes a vessel under power, then sail must give way. The rule states, any vessel overtaking any other vessel shall keep out of the way of the vessel being overtaken. The overtaking vessel may pass on either side, whichever is safest. If both vessels are power-driven, we then apply one of two rules. Rule 14 applies to two power-driven vessels approaching each other head-on. In this case, the rule states that neither vessel is stand-on, and both vessels give way to each other, altering course to starboard, passing port to port. Rule 15 applies to power-driven vessels in a crossing situation. In this case, the rule states that the vessel which has the other on her own starboard side shall give way. In other words, give way to starboard or yield to vessels approaching from your right. We'll now switch to the other side of the algorithm and cover vessels approaching each other under sail. It's important to apply sailing rules to vessels under sail and power rules to power-driven vessels and not get mixed up. For instance, there is no head-on situation in sailing. Vessels under sail approaching each other head-on are on opposite tacks. Rule 12 states that when sailing vessels approach each other on opposite tacks, the vessel on the starboard tack shall stand on. So let's take a look at that now. Remember that the tack is determined by the windward side of the vessel, and that the rules define the windward side as the side opposite the main. So in this case, boat A is on starboard tack and boat B is on port. So if there was a risk of collision, boat B would have to give way. Let's look at that one more time in an animation. Remember that the give-way boat should do so early and substantially, ideally going astern of the stand-on boat. Rule 12 further states that when sailing vessels approach each other on the same tack, the windward vessel will give way to the leeward vessel. Here we see boats A and B on port tack, but all the others are on starboard. Boat C is the furthest upwind, so would have to give way to all the other starboard tack vessels to leeward. Here we see boat A on starboard tack, sailing on a beam reach, and boat B, also on starboard tack, to leeward, sailing close hauled. So boat A would give way to boat B. Once again, the give-way boat does so early and substantially, ducking the stern of boat B. If a sailing vessel on a port tack sees another vessel to windward and cannot determine the other vessel's tack, they will assume the other vessel is on starboard and will give way. Finally, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there is no right of way. It is every mariner's responsibility to avoid a collision if they can do so, regardless of who is stand on or give way. See you again soon in our next episode, when I go over the steps for raising a mainsail. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I wish you all fair winds and following seas.